body chasing the truth.
Feels good, doesn't it? All that rage. Do it.
This is the most important Joe Rogan video you will ever watch in your lifetime. Gives you an idea what's really going on in the country. So let's jump right in.
The Joe Rogan experience.
You're already seeing a lot of people in the black community that have turned towards Trump because they're seeing what's going on with this immigration and how it's affecting them, and the fact that these people that are coming in that are illegal immigrants are getting so much aid that they're not getting. And they're like, this is fucking crazy. This is our community, and you're having these people come in, you're giving them food and money and shelter, and you won't do it for us, and we've been here forever, and we're Americans. This is crazy. And then
The reason why they're doing that is because Democrats and liberals feel that no matter what happens, that they will always have black people's vote. So since Democrats can't win elections the fair way, we'll flood the country with as many illegals as we can from all over the world, give them all types of benefits, and then in return, they'll vote for us. And that's what they're doing.
there's a lot of people that, like even Michael Rappaport, because of the way things are going in the world, is saying that, and he fucking hates Trump, and he talks wild shit about Trump. Even he's saying that first of all, that's not off the table, and that now that's the only solution.
Well,
now, I have a different theory on Michael Rappaport. You know, I want him to vote for Trump no matter what. If he wants to say it's because of illegal immigration, that's fine, that's his right, but I don't believe that. I believe that Michael Rappaport is mad about all the anti-Semitism going on around the city and in the colleges and around America in general, and from all the pro-Palestinian supporters, the Palestinians themselves. So I think that's really his angle and his motivation. And I mean, I agree with him. I couldn't agree with Michael Rappaport more. What's going on in New York City is absolutely disgusting. You think that you have the right to destroy businesses, chase Jewish people down the street, assault them, do all types of unthinkable things and disrespectful comments and destroying businesses and knocking on Jewish students' doors in colleges and demanding that they leave certain rooms. It's absolutely disgusting. I mean, that's a whole different video, so I'm not going to get into that. But I really feel that's Michael Rappaport's angle. Whether he wants to admit it or not, that's fine. But I agree with Michael Rappaport in that sense. If he doesn't want to say it, then I will. What's going on in this country, all the anti-Semitism, is absolutely disgusting.
I don't think we're there yet, but I don't think on the basis of the time he would have, his temperament, or his ability to build a team. You know, Trump is kind of a one-man show, and his team-building ability, I don't think, is enough to solve the problem either. But the punchline of that is, if Kennedy can't do it, for whatever reason, if politics gets in the way, we still have to get whatever that cabal is out of power immediately. This could not be more of an emergency. We've seen through COVID how dangerous these people are, how little they care about our well-being, and we have to rally around whatever it is that addresses this problem. And, you know, as much as I'm not a believer that Trump on his own can do the job, I would far prefer him to another standard bearer of that cabal, the cabal.
This is what I mean. This is why I say that liberalism is a mental disorder. First of all, Trump has already done it. Like, what are you talking about? Trump's already been the president, Bret Weinstein, and he's already secured the border. And they already had the lowest record numbers of illegals crossing ever. The economy was at its best. The crime in the streets was down. We were never safest. We were the safest under Trump than we've ever been. And this is what I mean when I say that liberalism is a mental disorder. He just can't admit that. Oh, I don't think he could do it by himself. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? He's already done it. Did you forget he was the president for 4 years? This is what I mean about, like, they just can't admit that that Joe Biden is an utter failure, that Democrats are a total failure all around the board. It's disgusting. Like, it's Trump derangement syndrome. Anybody can sit. Are you really going to sit there and say he can't do the job? Let's be serious. Okay, fine. You don't like him personally. But to say that he can't do the job, I don't care how educated you are, you sound ignorant.
All is too dangerous. And I say this, as you know, I'm a lifelong Democrat.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? This is my party that I'm telling you cannot be trusted with governance. But that's where we are.
The border crisis. So you went and saw the migration. You saw the groups of people that are making their way up through.
Yeah, I was invited. Actually, my son Zach, and I went to Panama, where I have some history. I did my bat work on Barrow, Colorado Island in Gatun Lake, the Panama Canal. So Panama is a place I'm familiar with, but Michael Yan invited us down to go look at the migration in the Darien province of Panama, which is the province bordering Colombia. As you probably know, there's a gap in the Pan American Highway, about 60 miles that were never built. In this highway that otherwise stretches from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska to the southern tip of South America. And what's there is a tremendously significant and very difficult jungle in the Darien Gap. So there's a national park there. And ordinarily, people do not cross the Darien Gap. It is a famously difficult obstacle. And what we see there is that the international community is encouraging a massive migration of people from South America into Central America.
So the international community is down there helping the migrants get across. Where's the CIA? Because you can operate over there with impunity and do whatever you want. So where's the CIA? You know where the CIA is? They're working for Joe Biden, allowing it. That's where you guys are.
America, and that almost all of those people are ending up crossing our southern border and entering the U.S. The ones who are questioned are claiming political asylum, which is not accurate. So we talked to many, many migrants, and the universal story amongst the migrants who would talk to us is that they were fleeing bad economic conditions in the direction of what looks like greater opportunity. They've been told by the international community that they should come across the Darien Gap, where many of them are not surviving the trek. It's extremely dangerous. And they're migrating north. Now, the really troubling thing, though, is that migration is familiar in one way. It looks a little bit like the migrations of Central Americans that migrated north when we were kids. But there is another migration. There is a migration of Chinese immigrants that looks different, feels different, and is being housed in a totally separate way in Darien for reasons that are not in any way obvious.
Who's ever housing the Chinese and the South Americans, encouraging them to cross over the border? Could you imagine if an American citizen was in another country doing that? What would happen to that American citizen? Who's ever in charge of that? Come on, CIA, where are you? Are there any patriots in this country anymore? Is there anybody that's willing to stand up to the Biden administration and their crime wave? Joe Biden is a criminal. He needs to be locked up. So does his son. Does anybody have any patriotism to the country whatsoever anymore in the CIA, and the DOJ? Well?
Yes. Now, I don't know exactly what to make of that. I have hypotheses. There are no more than that. But the Chinese migration is not forthcoming about why it is migrating. It is composed mostly of young military-age men. There are some women present, but it's not 50-50 by far. And the international community has arranged separate encampments. The Chinese are in many cases traveling a separate way across the Darien Gap. They're skipping some of the worst parts of it, traveling by boat. And as I think I mentioned...
So they're boating the Chinese... There's an organization that's putting illegal Chinese on boats, driving them to certain places so they can get across the American border, and the American government doesn't have them arrested or do whatever they got to do to stop that. So, the next time, I'm not even going to say it, but just law enforcement, CIA, FBI, come on, let's be serious here. You know, the same enthusiasm that you show for locking up January 6th protesters, maybe you should get over there overseas and start locking these people up that are literally causing an invasion at our border.
Mentioned, they are, when asked where they're from, where they're going, why they're going, they are uninterested in talking. There's a hostility to it that I found shocking. Because for one thing, if you imagined folks from almost anywhere in the world were heading to the U.S. because they didn't like the way things were in China, they feared their government, they thought that there was economic opportunity, they would be curious about Americans. These are soon to be their countrymen. They would tend to be interested in talking. And even if they, for some reason, because they had lived under a totalitarian regime, felt that they couldn't talk, they wouldn't be broadcasting hostility. They would be ambivalent or something. And that is not the impression that they leave when interacting with them. So I found that utterly alarming. And I came to wonder if the migration of people coming up from South America, many of whom, by the way, are not South American. There are people coming from the Middle East. We met Afghans. There are people from Iran, Yemen, all over the world. They land in Ecuador.
They land in Ecuador, people from Middle East countries that have terrorist ties, that are completely unvetted walking across the border. There's been a known amount of terrorists caught, and there's been thousands that haven't been caught. And Joe Biden and Democrats and liberals will look at you in the face and tell you that there is no issue. It's evil, it's demonic, it's criminal. They all need to be locked up.
Which has no visa requirement. And then they migrate through Colombia into Central America and straight up to the U.S.
There you go.
But in any case, that massive migration seems to provide a cloak for this other migration from China, which is nothing if not mysterious.
Why are they letting it happen? Why do you think the government is allowing the border to be so porous? And why are they resisting?
Joe, because China owns Sleepy Joe and his corrupt kid. When we look back in history, Joe, where we look back where the country went totally underwater, it's because of an old man, Joe Biden, who couldn't remember his name, who literally goes to the bathroom in his pants and thinks the most important issue in America right now in a Super Bowl commercial is chips missing out of the bag and his drug addict junkie son, Joe. That's why. Because they're so corruptible. Joe Biden and Hunter Biden have sold the country out basically for drug money. Literally, $100,000, a diamond ring. The Chinese government laughs themselves to sleep every night how corrupt and cheap the Bidens could be bought. It's just laughable for that type of money also.
When Texas tries to do something about it.
Well, I always worry when we're trying to understand what's happening and the information is not being shared with us. You have to ask yourself the question of how many separate things are in play, right? Before I went to Panama, I thought there was a migration of people. Now I think there are two. One of them's clearly a migration, and the other one could well be an invasion. So if I know that there are two things, then I can put them in two categories, and I can ask myself the question, why is this being allowed and why is that being allowed? The consensus, maybe consensus is too strong, but the belief amongst many who have been on the story of the migration for years now is that this is a ploy to create voters, Democratic voters. And I don't think that's impossible. I think that's probably playing a role. I don't know how realistic it is. I don't know whether or not it is clear that migrants necessarily carry.
Would any other country in the world allow millions upon millions? If America tomorrow, we had no food, no water, no shelter, no nothing, just zero, if we were just wiped out, do you think any country in the world would just take millions of us and just let us come in there and give us everything? They wouldn't give us anything. They would all let us starve and die off and fend for ourselves. That's what would happen. So let's have millions upon millions of people who have no patriotism or stock in the country come and just drain the resources dry. Great job, Joe Biden. Great job, Democrats. And great job to anybody that support this. Wonderful.
Be the likelihood of voting blue that the blue team imagines. But anyway, I think that that's a plausible explanation in part, but I don't think it really covers it. There are other hypotheses that are darker. There is talk about the possibility of trading citizenship for military service. I think that's a very frightening prospect, but I didn't invent the idea. It has been discussed, and the problem is that to the extent that we saw things like the vaccine mandate drive out the skeptics from the military, this process would also bring in a lot of people into military service who would have more reason to follow immoral orders than a citizen soldier who had been American their whole life. In other words, if the power structure is granting you citizenship which you want in exchange for your obedience, then what is it that would cause you to say no? So if you wanted a force that was capable of acting on behalf of tyranny against Americans, then a force that doesn't have a deep history with the rights of being an American, that doesn't have a long-standing allegiance to people within the country, that force would be potentially more compliant, and that worries me.
That should worry you. I really didn't consider that until you just said that.
Joe Biden is the biggest piece of garbage that ever walked the face of the planet, and that's exactly what they're doing. They know the American military won't fire on its own people, so we'll replace that military with a group of people that have, don't care about American citizens, that will follow orders because they want their citizenship. And that's Joe Biden is one of the most evil, corrupt, despicable human beings that have ever walked the face of the planet.
But my thought about this idea of the military turning on the citizens was always, but the military is citizens. And many of them are deeply patriotic and unlikely to do something like that. But if they did swap out immigrants, and they did do that, holy shit.
This is exactly...
Then you have a real coup.
This is what spooks me, is that in thinking about the various scenarios 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I would have said, I fear that somebody is going to issue immoral orders to the military, but I'm convinced that the military will divide over them. That there are those who will carry out immoral orders, and there are others who won't.
And at the same time, there was a senator, I think, from Massachusetts, that introduced a bill to ban what they call paramilitary training, which is just training with firearms, like to get better at them.
Right.
So the idea is you have a right to keep and bear arms, but you can't be good at them because you can't practice.
It's always some Democrat with this type of idea, some liberal, like, yeah, you can own an AR-15 and an AK-47, but you just can't practice how to shoot it. What could possibly go wrong? Liberalism is a mental disorder. Bottom line, it's despicable. Liberalism is a total mental disorder that, you need to be in a mental institution.
So, if you imagine, in my naive state a few years ago, the idea was, well, you have a very well-armed populace. You have a military that's likely to be divided about immoral orders. I don't like the sound of that, but I don't think that it's a slam dunk that the tyrants win, because the part of the military that's not going to follow immoral orders and the citizenry that will fight to defend the republic, that's a pretty powerful force. But then you have vaccine mandates, which force out most of the people who are independent-minded from the military. And then you have the idea that migrants might be granted citizenship in exchange for military service. And
has that been introduced anywhere, or is this just a complete hypothesis?
No, it's not a hypothesis. Actually, maybe Jamie, you could look it up. I don't want to slander anybody, but yes, I believe it has been raised by at least one senator.
Jesus Christ.
Is that the paramilitary thing?
No. The other thing, the thing about granting citizenship to illegal immigrants in exchange for military service.
So, in any case, I did not took a lot of thinking about different pieces of the puzzle to begin to wonder about something like this. But having wondered about it, it doesn't disappear from my mind as, oh, that's just simply crazy. Actually, this, given the number of things that don't add up, this begins to explain them in, a reasonably parsimonious way. And it has me worried. But that is not inherently, in fact, it is probably not the same thing as what would explain the concentration of Chinese migrants.
Right.
Right? The Chinese migrants presumably have left China with the knowledge of their government. The bias of that group in favor of males is something we can talk about if you want to, but it has an obvious interpretation. And that ought to frighten us as well, right? So at the same...
How many are we talking about? Is there an estimate of how many military-aged Chinese men have gotten into the country?
Now, I'm always hesitant at this point in the conversation because what I saw is what one person looks at through their eyes. So I'm in no position to estimate that. But I believe we are talking about tens of thousands. Certainly, when we're talking about the entire migration, we are talking about millions. And the number that is flowing through Central America, the flow-through rate in a given day is many thousands. So it's hard to know, and I would want somebody who was in a position to look at an estimate, not just a spot check.
So if the tyrannical government is playing some long game of chess, these are the pieces they would be
Closest
moving.
I could find on a number.
Chinese immigrants who entered the U.S. without authorization. 2023, it's over 30,000. Look at how low it was in 2021
Yep.
and how high it is in 2023.
What's the source on this?
This is the U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
Oh my God. And that's probably a low estimate. It's probably like VAERS.
When I was looking up the other thing about the military, I think you have to have a green card first. before you
And they give them a green card. But
this also was talking about the numbers are down for the Air Force, the Army.
yeah, for everybody. They're actually asking people who retired to come back.
There you have it. First of all, the numbers are down in the military because of the woke transgender nonsense where, you're having leadership in the military, a grown man walk in the room with a dress on and high heels, demanding that you call him, her, she, and miss. So, yeah, I'm going to risk my life, put my life on the line, and my superior is going to act and look like that. Hey, who he sleeps with is none of my business in his spare time. But when he comes to work in the military, you better be in uniform like everybody else. All you have to do is tell him, hey, that's not an appropriate way to dress. End the story. Be in your uniform like everybody else or take a hike. But of course, under Joe Biden and the Democratic regime, that's too much to ask for. So the military will just empty itself. Then along with the COVID thing, you can't say that on the channel. But here's the big thing that I want to say to Joe Rogan. All right, Joe Rogan has a wife. Joe Rogan has kids. Bret Weinstein, the same thing. And all of these facts, why Joe Biden might be allowing this type of migration to happen, the possibility of letting these people into the military because they're more willing to open fire on American citizens, that they're more willing to turn against the populace of the United States because they don't have patriotism towards the country or its citizens. And Rogan knows that, right? And all his friends know that. And in typical Joe Rogan fashion, being a coward that he is, he still won't throw 1,000% support behind Donald Trump on his platform. You know all of that, Rogan. You got all this money to last 100 lifetimes. You know all of this stuff. You have children, but yet you still refuse to just be a man and say, I had it, I'm supporting Trump, I don't care. Right, Joe? I know everybody will get, you're just mad because I don't care what Joe Rogan owns or doesn't own. I don't care how many subscribers he has or doesn't have. I don't care how many I have. What concerns me and what makes me angry is this is the greatest country in the world and it's being ruined by a corrupt president and his drug addict son. It puts everybody's lives in danger here. It puts generations of young children to live under a communist regime like in North Korea or Cuba or one of these places. And the big tough guy Joe Rogan, knows Kung Fu, knows this, he knows that. He has all these facts. He's just so scientific about everything. You know, he's the smartest guy ever. He knows all that. And yet, with all that being said, he still won't just come out and make a definitive statement and say, I support Donald Trump for the 2024 election. And so all you clowns that just look up to Rogan like he's, God and he's a big tough guy, just blindly look up to him. Let that sink in for a minute. Let your family's future sink in and start to think to yourself about the people who you look up to.